Welcome back, City Builders. Kodiak the Kodiak here. On this week's news update, we get a bunch of new information from the official City Skylines 2 livestream. Maddie educates us on how a specific feature in the game functions that I don't think anybody knew about, as well as a new UI change that is definitely a bit controversial. Now, before we get started, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you can keep up to date on all the City Skylines 2 news. And don't forget to leave a comment with any thoughts and opinions you might have, or with anything I might have missed this past week. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so before we get in too deep this week, I want to talk about the FPS graph that we showed off last week and the fact that the creator I was actually looking at was playing the game in 4K, which makes sense on why the game was so GPU dependent. The higher resolution you're at, the more GPU load you'll actually have, and the lower the resolution, the more it will actually move onto your CPU. Now, that doesn't mean that all games at 1080p will be a more CPU-dependent experience, or at least a more balanced experience. Sometimes they're just more GPU heavy. But that doesn't mean that you won't be able to offload some of those resources off the GPU and onto the CPU. So on a 3080 at 1080p, you might actually be able to get 60 FPS in a lot of situations. So that's the little update I wanted to give on that one because I wanted to make sure I covered that absolutely fairly. So that way you don't go into this thinking that like, it's just going to be terrible. It's going to be a terrible gameplay experience. Well, actually this creator was playing at 4K and, you know, not everyone does. So if you're not playing on 4K, you might actually have a much better and smoother gameplay experience than that creator. Okay, on to the new news now. Now, I'm recording this on Friday night. I have a wedding I have to go to on Saturday, which is when I recorded the last week's video. So I just want you guys to know that if anything big happens tomorrow or anything like that, well, actually it'd be yesterday, the day I upload it, whatever, the Saturday. Just know that I probably didn't see it or didn't get the opportunity to put it in the video. So if there is some kind of big breaking news and I wanted to update you guys, it'll be in a pinned comment down below. So just make sure you check down there in case something needs to be changed or redacted for whatever reason. Now, the first big news is that the next batch of creator videos is actually coming out on Wednesday the 11th. And these videos are going to be an hour long. According to Slay3K on his community post, he said Wednesday's videos can be up to an hour, but there is a progress limit still. So they still won't be able to go to Megalopolis. I'm not sure what their embargo entails in terms of like what they're not going to be able to show or are going to be able to show starting the 19th. You know, when we hear the words embargo is lifted, I don't know if that means complete embargo is lifted or if there's certain embargoes that are being lifted. For example, they might be able to show up to a certain milestone as many times as they want, in as many cities as they want, and do tutorials, but they still might not be able to show the last batch of milestones for whatever reason. So until I see confirmation that they will be able to show everything about the game, just assume that that's as far as they'll be able to go, but their embargo will also lift on the 19th, and the 11th will be the next batch of videos, and they will be an hour long. So I'm so excited to see what these creators are able to do. And who knows, it could just be one more step of milestones and that they're just giving them an extra hour because, you know, as you get further into the game, it gets harder and harder and you need to spend a little bit more time to get further in the progression. The next batch of videos all came from the PDX live stream that they do on the City Skylines YouTube channel featuring Maddie and Pretty, who are the community managers for City Skylines. The first thing I want to touch on is the final radio station. So there's going to be 3 radio stations in the game at launch, and the final radio station is going to be up on Spotify. Actually, right now, you can go on Spotify right now. I will leave a link to it down in the description, and if you want to look at the other 2 radio stations, they are in the previous week's video, which I will put up here in the annotation, so you guys can go check out that one where I discuss everything that we learned the previous week. Now, Maddie did say that she's going to be uploading these to YouTube as well, and whenever she decides to do that, or has the ability to do that, or the time to do that, because I'm sure they are very busy people, this will be included down in the description as well, so you'll be able to look at all of the radio stations on YouTube sometime in the near future, but for now, they're all on Spotify. Maddie also talked about the decision to delay the console release. Now, obviously, Maddie and Pretty are not developers. They're just the community manager for City Skylines, so they don't know all the details, but basically their TLDR was that it just wasn't in a state that they thought would be acceptable to everyone, and honestly, I can't blame them. One of the worst marketing things you can have happen to a new game is getting review bombed. And I know that this is maybe a controversial opinion because I'm sure some people will swing the other way on it, but I would rather have a game that's actually finished and polished come out and take the delays as needed in order for them to reach that point than get a subpar product and then just have to guess when it's going to be finally updated to the point in which it should have been at launch anyways. I know a lot of people are really desperate to play the game and you want it as soon as possible and you're willing to take it at an unfinished state, and I totally get that. My personal opinion would be I would just rather wait, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I totally don't blame you if you want the finished product now, but it's just not ready. Now, during the PDX live streams, a bunch of people were noticing some frame stuttering that was going on. Now, the game is in an unfinished state, and they repeated that multiple times, and I think we should all recognize that at this point, that the build that people are playing on for the creator build and the dev live streams is going to be different than the launch version of the game, and they will be going through some levels of optimization before coming out. We see a lot of frame hitching going on, where there's like these occasional stutters in some people's videos or in the developer live stream, and those things are, I expect, to be kind of fixed, or like at least worked out by the time the game actually comes out. And so I'm not looking too deeply into some of these like minor performance glitches. I know a lot of people were very persistent in pointing it out in the developer live stream. So Maddie gave a pretty clear specs breakdown of the computer. It was pretty short. She didn't know all the specs of the computer that she was playing on, but she did say that it's a 3070 and that they were running on 32 gigabytes of RAM. The game looked like it was performing pretty well at the population they were at. I think they were up to 20,000 people, and it did look like they were a little below 60 FPS, but I don't know what resolution they were playing on. She didn't give any kind of details about what the processor was, but the game looked like it was running fine, so that's a good sign, especially with all the information last week of the minimum and recommended requirements getting bumped up for City Skylines 2. I think that is just a really good sign that the game looks like it's running well, and looking at the specs of that computer, they don't even meet the recommended specs of City Skylines 2, and the game's running fine. So if you're a little concerned that, oh, I had a 2080 and I met the recommended specs before, is it going to be fine? Yeah, I think you're still going to be all right. Now, next up isn't a piece of news necessarily, and more just like a feature in the game that I don't think has really been explained by anybody yet, or maybe no one even knew until Maddie talked about it. So on the left-hand side of the screen right now, you will see the cargo terminal, and you'll see the actual route of the cargo terminal. If we've looked at any of the transit options in City Skylines 2, you'll actually notice that this is kind of just the view for your routes from now on. So it's this big oval, and then you have the actual routes, and you can click on them, and it'll take you to wherever the route's destination is for that spot. Now, I'm going to let Maddie explain this, and then I'm going to re-explain it just so we all kind of know what this feature actually is and how it works.
So you see how this dot is not white?
Yeah.
The more the center of that dot fills with the color of the train line, so in this case, like a weird poopy brown, the more things are at that stop waiting to be transferred.
Oh.
So there's a ton of cargo at these stations waiting to be transported. So we might want to add another vehicle to this line.
So essentially what Maddie's saying here is that these circles over here on the left, the darker the color is in those circles, the more stocked up cargo that's actually waiting to be used and transferred at this station. So at the end, she ends up deciding to add another train to this cargo station, and hopefully over time that will reduce the darkness of those circles and they'll become a lighter color. The lighter color signals that there's less cargo waiting to be transferred at these stations. Now, I actually think that's a super duper cool feature that I just didn't, I mean, like, I don't think anybody really would have necessarily noticed that if she didn't say it, or at least it would have took somebody probably a considerable amount of time to figure out that that was the case. So remember, if you see those circles and they're getting a little darker, or they're a little darker than you remember them being, you might need to add another vehicle to transfer cargo or create other cargo transfers. Now, the last feature or gameplay thing that they actually talked about in the developer diary were these new up arrows for money. Let's look at them right now. So at the bottom of the screen, you will now see next to the population and the money amount, there's actually just a solid up arrow that signals up, and there's no longer the actual number that's going up or down. Now, for population, I guess I kind of understand this change, or at least I understand it a lot more than changing this for the money amount. Now, the way Maddie explained it was that the developers actually thought of it more as a way that, you know, you don't really need to know the money amount that's being shown on screen. You just need to know where the trend's going. And I wholeheartedly disagree on the money side of things. In fact, I've been very critical of the fact that I don't like the way that they're actually even showing off the money amounts. In fact, that, you know, we have some things that'll say per hour, and then some things that are saying per month. But I would much rather have it say per hour or per month or whatever weird statistics they want to use to describe the money amount than them just giving me an up arrow and having me have an extra layer of something else to go to figure out if I can afford to place the building down. Now, granted, you can hover your cursor over the money amount in order to see how much money you're actually making, but it doesn't change the fact that that's like just an extra step to go through in order to figure out how much money you're making and how much money you can afford to spend. Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's saying this isn't a big deal, but I know for a fact that a lot of people really disliked this change based on how the YouTube chat reacted to them talking about this, as well as some of the creators who maybe have early access who have spoken negatively about it. So I hope and expect for that to be changed back. And I'm sure some of you are going to be like, why are they wasting their time working on the UI when there's some aspects of the games that aren't finished, like Xbox? And an important thing to remember here is that people on the dev team are tasked with different jobs, and they might not be able to fix the problems that other people are tasked with fixing. You can't just throw developers at every single problem. They need to be onboarded, they need to see how things are working, and they can't just magically jump onto a team and fix all of the issues. Not to mention that an Xbox developer could be developing the game completely different than how a PC developer develops the game. And so somebody who's developing the game from a UI perspective, a UI developer, is probably just trying their best to make a good system. And while I appreciate that, I just think that this one is an L. One really cool thing, though, is that these up arrows will actually change on severity based on how much money you're making. So if you're only making a small amount of money, it'll be 1 arrow, but then if you're making a lot of money, it'll be upwards of 3 arrows, kind of like a fast forward arrows. And I think that these could be really cool working in conjunction with the numbers. Imagine if you're a new player to City Skylines, or you're just coming into the new game and you don't really understand how money has scaled. This can be a really good and easy key for you to look at and be like, oh, I'm actually making a ton of money because the game's telling me I'm making this huge arrow amount, right? Or if you're losing money, you could be like, oh my gosh, I'm losing tons of money. The arrows are going crazy downwards. So while I really like the idea, I just don't think it should be the only thing we see on screen with our money amount. Now, the last thing I have to point out is that on next week's live stream on Wednesday on the City Skylines channel, they will be joined by a design developer from Colossal Order. Much like how they had Ivania visiting them 2 weeks ago, they will have a design developer visit them this upcoming week. So that'll be really cool. Hopefully we get to hear a little bit more about the game and some of the design decisions and ask them some questions. So if you guys are excited for that, make sure you guys take a look at the City Skylines YouTube channel on Wednesday, along with watching all the cool content creator videos. I know I'll be watching Canadian Moose Plays and Slay3K's video. Let me know down in the comments who you will be watching. Anyways, that's going to be it for me, guys. I want to thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I hope we get some cool new news regarding City Skylines 2 this upcoming week. And if you guys enjoyed the video and just appreciate any amount of work that I put into this, make sure you guys drop a subscription and, you know, like the video because that's good, and leave a comment because it's also good, and algo. Anyways, bye. Deuces.